Most people spend their lives moving too fast to feel it. They keep moving because stillness makes the flicker louder. They keep talking because silence makes it undeniable. They keep seeking the validation of other people because their own internal signal, that quiet, persistent, deeply accurate signal, is telling them something they are not yet ready to hear. And so they bury it under plans and commitments and the comfortable momentum of a direction already chosen. Under the opinions of people who mean well but don't know the full truth. Under the story they've been telling themselves about why this is the right path, told so many times it has started to feel like fact. And then the path takes them somewhere they never intended to go. Not because they were stupid. Not because they were lazy or cowardly or incapable of good judgment. Because they were moving too fast to look. Because the wrong path did exactly what the wrong path always does, it looked completely reasonable. It looked like the logical next step. It looked, from the outside, like progress. And by the time it became undeniable that something was wrong, the cost of recognizing it had compounded enormously. Machiavelli, a man who studied the machinery of human failure with more precision and less sentimentality than almost any thinker before or since, had a name for this. He called it the failure to see. Not the failure to try, not the failure to work hard, not the failure to want the right things. The failure to see things as they actually are, in time, before the investment of years has made the truth too expensive to face. He watched it happen to princes and generals and men of enormous intelligence and capability. He watched people with every advantage walk directly into ruin, not because the ruin was hidden but because they had developed the habit of not looking. Of trusting momentum over examination. Of mistaking certainty for clarity. And he wrote about it, with the unsentimental precision of a surgeon, because he believed that the person who understood the mechanism of the wrong path before they walked it had an almost unfair advantage over the person who had to learn it through the cost of living it. This video is that understanding. For you. Right now. At the moment it can still change everything. We are going to spend the next 40 minutes doing something that most people never do at a crossroads. We are going to stop and look. Completely. The anatomy of how the wrong path seduces intelligent people. At the specific mechanisms, the psychological, social, emotional mechanisms, by which a person who genuinely wants to make good decisions ends up making catastrophically bad ones. At the voice inside you that already knows something is off, and the precise reasons you have learned to discount it. At the 5 forms the wrong path most reliably takes. At the cost, the real, specific, arithmetic cost, of walking it past the point of this conversation. This is not comfortable material. Truth at a crossroads almost never is. But discomfort at the fork, however acute, however destabilizing, is the cheapest form of discomfort available to you. The discomfort of seeing clearly now, before the first step. Before the years. Before the person you become on the wrong path makes the person you could have been on the right one permanently inaccessible. The path is still in front of you. The torch is still burning. The choice is still, completely and entirely, yours. Let us look at it together. Drop this in the comments. I stop. I look. I choose to see clearly. Part 1. Why the wrong path always looks right. Let me begin with the most important thing I will say in this entire video. The thing is, if you take nothing else from today, you must take this. The wrong path never announces itself as the wrong path. Read that again. Feel the full weight of what it means. Because most people, somewhere in the back of their mind, are operating on the assumption that if they were about to make a truly significant mistake, they would feel it. That there would be an alarm. A visceral, unmistakable signal that what they are about to do is wrong. That their gut would revolt, their instincts would fire, some deep and reliable part of them would refuse to proceed without a fight. Sometimes that happens. For small decisions. For obvious ones. When the wrongness is surface level and immediate and requires no special perceptiveness to feel. But for the decisions that matter most, the ones that shape the direction of years, the ones that build the architecture of a life, the signal is not an alarm. It is a whisper. And the wrong path is everything except an obvious mistake. It is a carefully constructed seduction. Here is how it works. The wrong path always brings gifts. It always comes with something you genuinely want, or something you have genuinely convinced yourself you want. Safety. Status. Belonging. The end of uncertainty. The relief of finally having a direction when you've been directionless long enough that any direction feels like rescue. It comes with the approval of people whose approval matters to you. It comes with the momentum of existing commitments and sunk investments. It comes with the social validation of a world that rewards visible action over invisible deliberation. And it asks one thing in return. One small thing, easy to grant because you're tired and the gifts are real, and the alternative, stopping, examining, potentially turning back, is so much harder than continuing. It asks you to stop looking too closely. To keep moving. To trust that the clarity you don't currently have will come later, once you're committed and it's too late to do anything about it anyway. That is the deal. The wrong path offers everything you want right now in exchange for your willingness to defer the examination indefinitely. Think about what it feels like to be on the wrong path before you know it is. Think about the people you've known, or the story you yourself might be living, who spent years walking in a direction that turned out to be wrong. Ask them, honestly, what the beginning felt like. Almost none of them will tell you it felt immediately, unmistakably terrible. Most of them will describe something far more dangerous. They will describe the feeling of relief, of momentum, of finally being in motion, of the validation of people around them who saw the choice and approved. Of a kind of energy in the early stages that felt like confirmation, because energy in motion is easy to mistake for energy in the right direction. The energy in motion is not the signal. It is part of the seduction. Because the wrong path, in its early stages, is indistinguishable from the right one in the most important respect, both require you to begin. Both require investment. Both produce early effort that feels like progress. The difference only becomes clear later. Sometimes much later. When the investment is deep enough that facing it honestly becomes one of the most costly things a person can do. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see but few can feel. Everyone can see what you appear to be doing. Very few pause long enough to feel, in their bones, in the honest silence before the morning noise begins, whether it is truly what they should be doing at all. Machiavelli was writing about political leadership. But the principle extends to every significant decision a human being makes. We judge by appearances. By the surface. By what a decision looks like from the outside, to our parents, our peers, the culture we were raised in, the social media timeline that curates only the version of lives we're willing to share publicly. We judge by whether the path looks reasonable, looks productive, looks like the kind of thing a person who has their life together would do. We almost never judge by the deeper signal. The feeling in the honest, undefended, pre-performance moments of our actual experience. The thing the voice is saying when the noise is off and we finally stop managing it. The seduction of the wrong path is complete because it operates on both levels simultaneously. On the surface, it looks right. And the voice that knows the truth gets buried under the surface, quieted by the gifts, suppressed by the social pressure, managed into silence by the sheer momentum of everything else pointing the other direction. The antidote to seduction is not more information. It is a different kind of attention. A slower, deeper, more honest quality of attention than the wrong path is designed to withstand. And developing that quality of attention, right now, about the specific path in front of you, is the work of this entire video. Let us begin. Drop this in the comments: the wrong path is a seduction. I refuse to be seduced. Part 2. Which one is yours? The wrong path is not one thing. It wears different faces for different people, in different chapters of life, shaped by different desires and different wounds and different blind spots. But in studying the patterns of human decision-making, from Machiavelli's forensic analysis of 16th-century rulers to the recurring patterns that show up in every era and culture, 5 forms of the wrong path appear again and again with devastating consistency. I want to take you through each one slowly. Not as abstract categories but as recognizable realities. Because the moment you see your path in one of these descriptions, really see it, with the specific clarity that recognition produces, something shifts. Something that has been vague and manageable becomes precise and undeniable. And precise and undeniable is where change becomes possible. The first path is the path of other people's expectations. This is the most common of the 5. And it is the most invisible, because it was built around you before you were old enough to question the architecture. It was assembled from the assumptions of the people who raised you, the culture that shaped you, the social environment that defined success before you had developed your own definition. It is the career that was always assumed. The relationship that was always expected. The version of achievement that was designed to satisfy the people watching, not the person doing. The person walking this path is not living their life. They are performing a version of a life that was scripted by other people's needs, their unfulfilled ambitions, their fears, their ideas about what a good life looks like. And the cruelest thing about this path is that from the outside, it looks successful. It gets the approving nods. It produces the right LinkedIn profile. It makes the right people proud. And so the person walking it has almost no social feedback available to tell them that something is wrong. The feedback they receive tells them everything is right. Only the internal signal, faint, persistent, chronically suppressed, tells a different story. That story sounds like this: I am living someone else's life. I am performing someone else's idea of success. And somewhere inside me, somewhere I rarely let myself go, there is a version of my life that is genuinely mine. That is going unlived. That is growing quieter with every year I spend here instead of there. The second path is the path of fear dressed as caution. This is the path that presents itself as the responsible choice. The sensible choice. The mature, adult, considered decision of someone who has thought things through and decided that stability is wisdom and risk is recklessness and the conventional road is conventional for a reason. And sometimes, genuinely, that is true. Sometimes caution is exactly what it appears to be, the product of real calculation, honest assessment, genuine wisdom about timing and resources and the actual risks involved. But there is another version of this. A version where caution is not the product of clear thinking but the language that fear has learned to speak to make itself socially acceptable. Where "I'm being practical" is the translation of "I'm terrified of what happens if I try and fail." Where "this is the sensible path" is the cleaned-up version of "I don't believe, at the deepest level, that I am capable of something more genuinely mine." The difference between real caution and fear dressed as caution is not visible from the outside. Both look like the same decision. The difference is only felt internally, and only if you are willing to ask the question most people actively avoid. Not "is this practical," but "what am I actually afraid of here?" And is that fear based on an honest assessment of the risks, or on a belief about my own inadequacy that I have never genuinely tested? I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Know which one you are, truly are, before you let fear make that decision for you. The third path is the path of false urgency. This is the path chosen not because it is right but because the waiting has become unbearable. Because something, loneliness, financial pressure, the social terror of being left behind while everyone around you appears to be moving forward, created a compressed window in which any clear road felt like rescue. And this one was available. And available, when you are desperate enough, starts to feel like right. False urgency is one of the most reliable manufacturers of wrong turns in human life. Because urgency by definition is the enemy of examination. It says, there is no time to look carefully. No time to sit with the question. No time to hear what the voice is telling you. The moment will pass. The opportunity will close. Decide now. And in that compressed, anxious, momentum-pressured space, the decision gets made from whoever is loudest, and whoever is loudest is almost never the quiet, honest, precise signal that knows what you actually need. Ask yourself, is the urgency I feel about this path real? Is the door genuinely closing, or does it only feel that way because stillness has become intolerable? Is this the right time, or is this simply the time when the pressure became too much to hold? Because urgency that is manufactured by anxiety rather than reality is one of the most dangerous navigational inputs available to a human being. It points you toward relief. And relief and direction are two entirely different things. The fourth path is the path of the half-truth. This is the path that contains real elements of alignment, genuine resonance with some of your values, real connection to some of what you want, but that is missing something essential. Something you have noticed but chosen not to examine too fully, because examining it would require you to step back from a path you have already begun to invest in. Already built a story around. I already told people about it. The half-truth path is uniquely dangerous because it can sustain a person for a very long time. The parts that are right provide enough genuine satisfaction to make the parts that are wrong seem like a reasonable trade. The moments of real alignment, and they are real, make the persistent misalignment seem like normal background discomfort rather than a signal worth acting on. And so the person continues. Half-fed. Half alive. Half present to their own life. Never quite suffering enough to act. Never quite satisfied enough to stop noticing the distance between where they are and where they genuinely need to be. The fifth path is the path of the person you used to be. This is the subtlest and perhaps the most poignant of the five. It is the path that was genuinely right, once. At a specific moment, in a specific chapter of your life, chosen with clarity and honest self-knowledge and real alignment with who you were then. And it was the right path. For that version of you. But that version has grown. Has changed. Has been shaped by the very experiences the path produced, and has arrived at a place that is genuinely different from the place where the path began. You are not who you were when you chose this direction. Your values have shifted. Your understanding of yourself has deepened. The things that felt like the highest expression of who you were then no longer feel like the highest expression of who you are now. And yet the path continues, carrying its original momentum, pulling you forward along a trajectory that was set by a person you no longer fully are. Walking the path of the changed person is not a failure of the original decision. It is a failure of the ongoing honesty required to acknowledge that you have outgrown it. A failure to honor the truth of your own evolution. And it produces a very specific kind of suffering, the suffering of someone who is doing everything they committed to and feeling, quietly and persistently, that none of it is quite right anymore. Look at these five paths. Not as possibilities but as mirrors. Which one is yours? Which one are you walking? Which one is in front of you at this specific crossroads? The recognition may be uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort here, at the fork, before the years, is the most valuable thing you can feel. Drop this in the comments. I see my path clearly. I name it honestly. Part 3, why you already know and why you are ignoring it. Here is the premise that everything in this video is built on. The premise that, if you accept it fully, changes the entire nature of what you need to do at this crossroads. You already know. Not partially. Not faintly. Somewhere in you, underneath the noise, beneath the competing voices, below the layer of justifications you have been carefully constructing, there is a part of you that already knows whether the path in front of you is right. It knows with a clarity that no external consultation, no amount of additional information, no further deliberation will sharpen. It was known before you watched this video. It has been known for longer than you have allowed yourself to acknowledge. The question, the only question that actually matters at this crossroads, is not what I know. It is why I am not acting on what I know. Let me tell you about the voice. What it is. How it speaks. Why it is reliable. And why you have developed, through years of practice, such extraordinary skill at not listening to it. The voice is not mystical. It is not the product of intuition in the vague, hand-wavy sense of that word. It is the accumulated intelligence of your genuine self, the part of you that has been quietly observing your life without the filter of performance or social management. The part that notices the persistent discomfort you've been calling nervousness. That registers the future you can't quite visualize no matter how hard you try. That feels the specific quality of wrong in certain situations that the thinking mind immediately rushes to rationalize away. It speaks in specific, recognizable ways. And I want you to listen for each one as I name them, because one of them will feel like it is describing your current experience with uncomfortable precision. It speaks through the persistent low-level discomfort that has been present since you began seriously considering this direction. Not the discomfort of a genuinely hard thing that is nonetheless right, the discomfort has a different quality. The discomfort of a right thing that is hard tends to be accompanied by a sense of underlying rightness. A sense that you are stretching toward something real. The discomfort the voice produces has a different texture entirely. It is the discomfort of wrongness. Of being subtly misaligned. Of moving in a direction that your deepest self did not fully consent to. It speaks through the conversations you avoid. The people you deflect when they ask certain questions. The specific inquiry that you answer with a redirect or a generality because a direct, honest answer would require you to say out loud the thing you have been keeping inside. Notice those deflections. Notice the conversations that make you feel slightly exposed when they get too close to the real thing. The voice lives in the territory that those deflections are protecting. It speaks through the future you cannot fully visualize. Not the future on the wrong path, that one you can describe in detail, because you've been rehearsing the narrative for the people who ask. The future of being genuinely, deeply, in the right place. The future of the right path. When you try to hold that image, not the performed version, the real one, does it feel solid? Does it feel like something you are moving toward, or does it feel like a hope you are performing? The inability to hold the image of genuine alignment is one of the voice's most precise signals. It is not titles that honor men but men that honor titles, and it is not the path that gives meaning to a life, but the life that either honors or betrays the path. The voice that tells you this path is not yours is not weakness. It is the highest form of self-knowledge available to you. And it speaks, most powerfully of all, in the quiet. In the specific window between sleeping and waking, or between the end of one distraction and the beginning of the next, when the noise pauses and the voice has a moment of access. In those moments, if you are willing to let them exist without immediately filling them, you will hear it. You may not like what it says, but you will hear it. Why are you ignoring it? There are always reasons. And they are almost always the same reasons, regardless of the specific path and the specific person. The first reason is social investment. You have told people what you're doing. You have allowed a narrative to take shape in other people's minds. And reversing the narrative now would require explanations you are not yet ready to give. It would mean being the person who changed direction, and in a culture that rewards visible momentum and mistakes course correction for failure, being the person who changed direction carries a social cost that feels enormous from the inside of it. Here is what that cost actually is. A period, days or weeks or months depending on your specific social environment, of awkward conversations and questioned explanations and the mildly uncomfortable feeling of being someone whose story has changed. That is it. That is the entire cost. Against the alternative cost, the years, the person you become on the wrong path, the life that goes unlived, the voice that grows progressively quieter the longer it is ignored, the social cost of changing direction is almost insultingly small. But from inside the social investment, it feels like everything. The second reason is sunk cost. You have invested in this direction. Time, money, energy, pieces of yourself. And the thought of walking away without the return those investments were supposed to produce feels like loss. Like waste. Like admitting that what you spent was spent for nothing. But this is the sunk cost fallacy in its most personally devastating form. The investment is gone regardless of what you do next. You cannot spend what has already been spent. Every additional step down the wrong path does not recover the previous investment. It adds to the total. And the person who stopped at this moment, who absorbed the loss of the sunk cost rather than compounding it with years of additional wrong path investment, is always, without exception, in a better position than the person who kept walking because turning back felt like admitting waste. The third reason is the absence of a clear alternative. The voice is telling you this direction is wrong. But it is not simultaneously handing you a fully formed, shovel-ready alternative to walk toward. And walking away from something without walking toward something feels like falling. It feels like choosing uncertainty over even a bad certainty. And so you stay. Because the wrong path is at least a path. At least a direction. At least the appearance of forward motion. But open space, the genuine uncertainty of someone who has stopped walking the wrong direction before they have found the right one, is not falling. It is the necessary condition for genuine choice. You cannot choose clearly from inside a momentum that is already carrying you. You can only choose clearly from stillness. From the honest open space between paths. The voice knows what it knows. It knows this is wrong. It does not always know immediately what right looks like. The courage it requires to trust it, to stop walking the wrong direction without yet knowing exactly which direction is right, is one of the most demanding things a person can do. And one of the most necessary. Stop. Stand still. Let the voice speak. It has been waiting for you to be quiet long enough to hear it. Drop this in the comments. I hear what I have been ignoring. And I let it speak. Part 4. How you talk yourself in. We are going somewhere deeply uncomfortable now. Because we have established that the voice knows. We have established that on some level, beneath the performance and the rationalizations, you have genuine knowledge about this path. And so the question that cannot be avoided is this: if you know, why do you not act on what you know? Part of the answer is what we covered in the last section: the social cost, the sunk cost, the absence of a clear alternative. But those are external obstacles. There is an internal mechanism that is, in many ways, more powerful than all of them. It is the extraordinary capacity of the human mind to construct convincing justifications for the choices it has already emotionally committed to. This is self-deception. And it is not a character flaw. It is a feature. A built-in, evolutionarily useful feature of a mind that needs to remain functional while making decisions under uncertainty and social pressure. The problem is not that you are capable of deceiving yourself. Every human being is. The problem is that at a crossroads, this significant self-deception is the single most dangerous force operating in your thinking. Let me name the 5 most common architectures. The specific structures that the deceiving mind builds to silence the voice and justify the wrong path. Recognize them not as abstractions but as thoughts you have actually had about the specific situation in front of you right now. The first architecture is the once I'm through this phase construction. This is the belief that the discomfort you're feeling is temporary. That it is the friction of transition, the adjustment period, the early difficulty that precedes any genuine reward. That if you just push through the learning curve, the establishing period, the sacrifice window, you will arrive somewhere that feels genuinely right. The tell is in the specificity. Or more precisely, in the absence of it. Ask yourself, what specific phase, exactly, do you need to get through? And what specific evidence do you have that getting through it will produce alignment rather than simply a different kind of wrong? And has the discomfort been decreasing over time as you've gotten further in, or has it remained constant, or quietly grown? The once I'm through this phase construction almost never comes with honest answers to these questions. Because honest answers to these questions are precisely what it was built to prevent. The second architecture is the I'll do what I really want later construction. This is the path chosen as a preliminary. The stable job is taken so that eventually, at some point, when the conditions are right, when there is enough saved, when the timing is better, there will be space for the real work. The practical relationship is maintained as a placeholder until the genuine connection arrives. The conventional path walked as a prelude to the unconventional one that will begin at a future date that remains perpetually vague. Later is not a time. Later is a fiction maintained by someone who is not yet willing to pay the actual cost of the choice they genuinely want to make. And the devastating thing about later is that it has a very consistent track record. A stable job becomes a career. The prelude becomes the whole story. The placeholder becomes permanent. The real thing, the one being saved for later, waits, year after year, until the waiting has become life. He who wishes to deceive will always find someone willing to be deceived. There is no more willing subject for your deceptions than yourself, and no deception is more costly than the one you practice on your own future. The third architecture is that everyone thinks this is right construction. This is the outsourcing of internal discernment to external consensus. The validation gathering exercise that has been dressed up as consultation. You share the plan with the people most likely to affirm it. You seek the voices that confirm the direction and unconsciously discount the ones that question it. You assemble enough affirmation to use as a substitute for the internal clarity you do not have. Notice who you have consulted about this decision. Notice who you have not consulted. Notice whose doubts you have not gone back to explore. Notice whether your consultation process has been designed to discover the truth, which would require specifically seeking people who might tell you the hard thing, or to confirm a direction you have already emotionally committed to. The fourth architecture is the I need to be certain before I can change direction construction. This is the impossible standard set specifically to prevent a difficult change from being made. The bar for certainty is placed precisely at the level that can never be reached, so that the uncomfortable decision to reverse or redirect can always be deferred pending more information. More time. More clarity. More evidence that will, conveniently, never arrive in sufficient quantities. Real decisions, the ones that matter, the ones that shape years, are never made with complete certainty. They are made with honest assessment, with the best available information, with the courage to act on what is known rather than waiting for the perfect knowledge that remains always just out of reach. The demand for certainty, when it appears at a crossroads, is almost always fear dressed as rigor. The fifth architecture is the most painful and the most personal. It is that I don't deserve something better at construction. The belief, buried so deep it rarely surfaces in clear language, that the wrong path is what is available to you. that the right path, the one the voice is pointing toward, belongs to other people. People with different gifts, different circumstances, different starting conditions. That wanting more genuine alignment is a form of arrogance. That settling is what responsible, realistic people do. This one lives deepest. And it is the most corrosive. Because it does not just keep you on the wrong path. It teaches you to be grateful for being there. It turns self-betrayal into something that looks, from the outside, like humility and maturity. And it quietly, persistently consumes the part of you that was supposed to insist on more. Look at your thinking about the path in front of you. Which of these architectures are operating? Be honest. The mind is capable of running several of them simultaneously, layering justification over justification until the original signal is so thoroughly buried that it can no longer be heard. The voice is still there. The deceits are what you have been building over it. Strip them away. One by one. With the ruthless, surgical honesty of someone who understands that no amount of sophisticated self-deception changes where the wrong path leads. It leads exactly where it was always going to lead. Regardless of how good the story you told yourself about it was. Drop this in the comments. I name my self-deceptions. And I refuse to keep building them. Part 5. What walking the wrong path actually costs. We have been talking about signals and mechanisms and the architecture of self-deception. All of it is necessary. But now I want to get completely concrete. I want to talk about money. Not money in a literal sense, though sometimes it is literally money. I want to talk about the real currency of human life. And I want to calculate, as precisely as possible, what the wrong path charges you for the privilege of walking it. Because most people, when they are standing at the crossroads, have calculated the wrong sum. They have calculated the cost of changing direction, the awkwardness, the explanations, the disruption, the period of uncertainty, and measured it against the cost of continuing. And continuing seems cheaper. It requires nothing new. It produces no new discomfort. It maintains the current equilibrium. That calculation is wrong. It is wrong because it compares the immediate, visible, socially legible cost of changing direction against the delayed, invisible, accumulating cost of continuing. And delayed invisible costs, by their nature, are almost always underestimated. Until they arrive. And by the time they arrive, they are no longer hypothetical. Let me give you the real arithmetic. The first cost is time. And I need you to sit with this one long enough for it to land with its full weight. Not as an abstract concept. As the actual reality of your actual life. Time is the only resource that is completely, permanently, irreversibly non-renewable. Everything else that the wrong path costs you, the money, relationships, reputation, even health to a significant degree, can, in most circumstances, be rebuilt. Time cannot. Every year you spend on the wrong path is a year that is gone. It does not return. It does not give you credit for having eventually wised up. It simply ends. And the arithmetic of time is particularly brutal because it is not linear in its cost. The years spent on the wrong path do not simply fail to contribute to the right direction. They actively work against it. They develop skills you don't need. They atrophy capabilities you do. They build habits of thinking and being that are optimized for the wrong path and that require genuine effort to undo. Every year on the wrong path is not just a year not spent on the right one. It is a year that made starting the right one harder. Calculate this specifically. How many years, at the current trajectory, before the wrong path becomes undeniable? How many years of recognizing the signal and managing it into silence? What would those years look like, spent differently? Who would you be at the end of them? Before all else, be armed with the honest arithmetic of your own situation. The unarmed man, wrote Machiavelli, is not merely at a disadvantage. He is, at the decisive moment, already defeated. Know the cost before you spend what cannot be recovered. The second cost is identity. This is the one that catches people most off guard. Because you expect to know what a path costs you in time and resources. You rarely account for what it costs you in terms of who you become while walking it. Paths shape people. What you do every day, what environment you inhabit, what values you are required to enact or suppress in order to function on the path you've chosen, who you spend your time with and what you talk about and what you practice and what you learn, all of this is relentlessly, persistently, powerfully working on you. You are not the same person at the end of a path that you were at the beginning. And the wrong path works on you in the wrong direction. It builds a version of you that is progressively more optimized for a life you didn't actually want. 5 years on the wrong career path and you have developed a particular professional identity, a network organized around the wrong industry, a skill set pointed in the wrong direction, and a sense of self partially built from doing work that was never genuinely yours. 5 years in the wrong relationship and you have been shaped by the specific dynamics of that relationship, the accommodations you made, the parts of yourself you suppressed, the version of you that learned to function in that particular emotional environment. The wrong path does not just take your time. It takes a version of you. The third cost is opportunity. Not in the vague doors that closed sense, but in the specific reality of what becomes unavailable as you move further down the wrong path. Every significant commitment closes other possibilities. Every year spent is a year in which different options were accessible that become less accessible as time and circumstance move. The person who spent 8 years walking the wrong path and then turns toward the right one is not starting from the same place they would have started at year 2 or year 3. Some things that were possible are no longer possible in quite the same way. Not all things, some doors remain open longer than we fear, and the catastrophizing about closed doors is itself a form of the sunk cost trap. But some things are close. An honest reckoning requires acknowledging that. The fourth cost is the relationship you have with yourself. This is the most intimate and the hardest to articulate. Walking the wrong path, particularly when you know it is wrong, when the voice has been speaking and you have been managing it into silence, damages the most essential relationship in your life. The relationship between you and your own honesty. Between you and your own clearest signal. Every day you suppress the voice that knows the truth, you are training yourself to distrust it. Every day you maintain a path you know is wrong, you are practicing a kind of self-betrayal that compounds, quietly, into a person who has learned not to listen to themselves. Who has learned that their deepest knowing is negotiable. That it can be overridden by social pressure or by the clever construction of enough justifications. And that damage does not stay confined to this decision. It spreads. It creates a person who finds subsequent decisions harder. Who brings to future crossroads the dim awareness that they have a history of knowing the truth and not acting on it. Who approaches the voice with suspicion rather than trust, because the habit of not listening has become the default. The fifth cost is the specific, surgical, late-arriving variety of regret that can only be produced by the wrong path. Not general sadness that life could have gone differently. The precise, specific, completely unavoidable knowledge, available only in hindsight, of the exact moment when you could have chosen differently. The exact conversation you could have had. The exact turn you could have made. And the exact understanding of how different, how genuinely and completely different life could have been. That cost is sitting right here, right now, at this crossroads. Entirely avoidable. You are at the exact moment, the exact one, when the calculation is still fully in your favor. When the cost of clarity is lower than it will ever be again. When the path is still in front of you and the arithmetic is still yours to do. Do it. With full honesty. Compare not the cost of changing direction to the comfort of continuing. Compare the cost of changing direction to the cost of where the wrong path leads. That is the real arithmetic. And real arithmetic always points the same way. Drop this in the comments. I calculate the real cost. Not the comfortable cost. The real one. Part 6. How intelligent people walk into ruin. Let me bring Machiavelli into the center of this now. Not as a source of quotations but as the forensic analyst he actually was. Because his value here, his specific, irreplaceable value, is not in his political theories or his historical context. It is in his methodology. His way of looking at the people around him and identifying, with uncomfortable precision, exactly how and why capable, intelligent, well-intentioned people destroyed themselves. He watched it happen throughout his career in Florence. He watched princes with real advantages make catastrophic mistakes. He watched generals with superior forces lose. He watched men who should have won everything lose everything. And he was not content with the comfortable explanation, bad luck, overwhelming forces, the cruelty of fate. He looked for the actual causes. The specific, identifiable, human causes that were present in every failure and that, if understood clearly, could be avoided. What he found was this. The intelligent people who walked into ruin almost never did so because of external forces they could not have anticipated or overcome. They did so because of a specific internal failure that made them incapable of responding effectively to their actual situation. He called it the failure of clear vision. The inability, or more precisely, the unwillingness, to see things as they genuinely were. Not as they wished them to be. Not as they feared they might be. Not as their advisors or their culture or their ego investment in a particular narrative said they were. As they actually were. In the present. With clear eyes and an untitled lens. This capacity, which Machiavelli considered the single most important quality available to any person who wanted to navigate their life effectively, is precisely what destroys the wrong path. Because the wrong path tilts the lens. It distorts the perception. It makes you see threats where none exist, because threats existed before. It makes you miss opportunities, because previous opportunities led to losses. It makes you misjudge people, situations, signals, because the past has taught you a set of patterns that you are now applying to a present that may not fit those patterns at all. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The difference between them is not intelligence, it is the willingness to see clearly at the beginning, rather than being forced to see at the end, when everything that could have been different has already been spent. There are 3 specific patterns that Machiavelli identified, through observation, through his own experience, through the exhaustive study of history, as the most reliable precursors to the wrong path and the most reliable producers of the intelligent person who walks into ruin despite having every advantage. The first pattern is the confusion of momentum with direction. Movement is not progress. Activity is not alignment. A person can be deeply, energetically, visibly in motion, making plans, taking steps, generating results, appearing from every external perspective to be heading somewhere important, and be moving in a direction that is entirely wrong. The momentum is real. The effort is real. The results are real. But the direction is wrong. And direction, compounded over years, determines everything. The person caught in this pattern has mistaken the feeling of motion for the feeling of right. They are busy enough to avoid examinations. They have enough results to point to when the doubt surfaces. And the doubt surfaces less and less often as the momentum grows and the investment deepens and the cost of questioning the direction becomes higher with each passing year. The second pattern is the delegation of discernment. This is what happens when a person, consciously or not, hands the responsibility for their own judgment to someone else. To the culture. To the approval of a social group. To the expectations of family. To the consensus of colleagues. to the validation of whoever is closest and loudest and most available to confirm the direction. The thinking feels like consultation. It is actually abdication. The person is not genuinely examining whether the path is right. They are collecting enough external confirmation to feel permitted to walk it without guilt. The third pattern, and this is the one Machiavelli returns to most insistently, is the deferral of honest assessment until the cost of honesty has become prohibitive. This is the pattern of the person who sees the signal, registers the doubt, notes the voice, and then defers the honest examination. Not permanently. Just until after this phase. Just until after this commitment. Just until after this investment has had time to pay off. And then again. And again. Until enough time has passed and enough has been spent that the honest assessment, if conducted, would produce a recognition so costly that most people find it easier to keep not looking. These patterns are not moral failures. They are the predictable products of a mind operating under social pressure, sunk cost pressure, identity pressure, and the completely natural human desire to avoid the discomfort of recognizing an expensive mistake. They are what intelligent people do when they have not developed the specific skill that Machiavelli considered foundational to any genuine effectiveness. The skill of seeing clearly. On purpose. Before the cost of clarity has compounded beyond the point of useful return. That is what this video is. And that skill, as uncomfortable as its application is what saves the years. What saves the person you become on the wrong path? What saves the voice from being trained into silence? What saves, ultimately, the life that was genuinely available to you if you were willing to stop at this exact crossroads and look? Part 2 of this series gives you the method. The specific, concrete, Machiavellian method for reading a path clearly before you walk it. For finding the right direction. For making the change when the change is warranted. For building the life that becomes possible when you apply this level of clarity at this level of crossroads. But the diagnosis had to come first. You needed to see the anatomy of the wrong path. The mechanisms of self-deception. The real arithmetic of the cost. And the pattern by which intelligent people, throughout history and throughout your own immediate experience, walk into ruin not despite their intelligence but in some ways because of it, because intelligence, in the service of self-deception, is extraordinarily effective. You have seen it now. You cannot unsee it. The path is still in front of you. Drop this in the comments, I see the pattern. I refuse to complete it. This was part 1. The diagnosis. The warning. The anatomy of the trap. We have done the hardest kind of work today, not the dramatic, motivational kind, but the quiet, precise, honest kind. We looked at how the wrong path seduces intelligent people. We named the 5 forms it most reliably takes. We listened to the voice that already knows and examined honestly why you have been ignoring it. We stripped away the architectures of self-deception. We calculated the real arithmetic of what the wrong path costs in the only currencies that actually matter. You have not walked the first step of part 2 yet. But the ground has shifted. Something that was invisible is now visible. Something that was vague and manageable is now named and precise. And named and precise is where change becomes possible. Part 2 is where you get the method. The specific, practical, Machiavellian method for reading a path before you walk it. For finding the direction that is genuinely yours. For making the turn when the turn is warranted. For building the life that this level of clarity, applied at this exact moment, makes available to you. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. And drop your affirmation in the comments, tell me which part of today hit the hardest. Tell me what you named today that you had been avoiding naming. Tell me what the voice is saying. Because it matters. It has always mattered. You simply had to stop long enough to let it speak.